The floor under me isn't a floor anymore. It's warm. It's breathing. Somewhere to my left, in the dark, I can hear what's left of Luke. Not screaming anymore, just a low, wet hum. And the hum is getting quieter, and the walls are getting louder, like something's trading one sound for the other. A voice near my ear says my name the way you'd say it to someone falling asleep. You've been so lost for so long, Julian. I want to tell you I fought. I want to tell you I got out. I'm not going to lie to you in the first 30 seconds of this story. 3 days before that, all I wanted in the world was to find someplace quiet. I've always liked places you're not supposed to go. Dead malls with the escalators still running to nowhere. A high school shut down for asbestos. Lockers still labeled with kids who are grown now. A shuttered wildlife park up near Perry Sound, where a buddy and I once spent a whole night dodging a security truck behind a concrete moat wall, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. The real reason I keep going back is that I'm chasing something specific. A kind of silence. Perfect silence. The kind you find in a food court that used to be full of teenagers fighting over pretzel stands and bubble tea, and now it's just echo and dust and one cockroach some field mouse is about to have for lunch. That silence isn't nothing. It's heavy. It breathes. It's a memory so deep, it's turned into something almost alive. Proof a place used to be full, and now it isn't. There's a real risk in it, too. Security guards, squatters, a ceiling deciding it's had enough and coming down on you for no reason at all. But every person who does this chases the same thing underneath it all. Being the first one to find a forgotten place. The feeling that you've stumbled onto a secret nobody else knows is out there. The air is different in those buildings. The second you step through the door, you're walking into a moment that got frozen mid-breath and never let go. A space that used to belong to hundreds of people now belongs, for however long you're standing there, only to you. You're the last witness to its slow, graceful collapse. There's a strange, sad kind of beauty in that. Discovery and loss at the exact same time. You're an archaeologist of the recent past, and it's your own quiet, private find. But some things aren't meant to be found. It was an ordinary Wednesday. My shift at the grocery store on the highway started at 6 that morning and ran till 2 in the afternoon. I came out through the automatic doors under the same sign I walked under 5 days a week. Thanks for shopping with us. Come again. A line I'd read so many times, it had stopped meaning anything. The name tag on my shirt used to say Julian in full. These days it's mostly a smear where the letters wore off, and a J I touch up with permanent marker so people stop asking if I'm new. I turned onto my street and hit a big orange detour sign I wasn't expecting. I vaguely remembered a flyer about construction starting sometime that week, and of course it had to be today. The one day I wanted to get home fast. I told myself, out loud like an idiot, take the back way, you already know this. Then I followed that detour for way too long, cursing at every new orange sign. One good thing happened on that drive, at least. Somebody a couple concessions over had a mint cherry red 67 Camaro sitting in their driveway, and it put me in a decent mood for about 90 seconds. That didn't last. Cutting through one of the older residential blocks, I hit an intersection with absolutely no signage, no stop sign, no street name, nothing. I eased the car forward, squinting down both directions for even one of those orange arrows. Nothing. So I gambled, turned left. After a run of turns that led nowhere, I gave up doubled back and just drove straight, hoping I'd cross a road I recognized. The detour signs had stopped being helpful and started feeling like some kind of prank. I drove another 10 minutes like that, my mood getting worse with every dead end. I was reaching for my phone to check the GPS when the road curved, and I noticed a side road I'd genuinely never seen before. No street sign, no name anywhere, just a quiet strip of pavement disappearing into a wall of trees. I turned onto it more out of frustration than curiosity, if I'm honest. The road itself was old, paved at some point, but coated in a fine layer of dust, like nobody had driven it in years. Trees pressed in tight on both sides, branches meeting overhead in a kind of natural tunnel, and the light coming through went thin and gray, like the whole road existed permanently at dusk. A few minutes in, the trees opened up, and there it was, a little town. Not big, a few dozen houses, a general store, something that might have been a tiny town hall. None of it was falling apart. No weeds in the sidewalks, no graffiti anywhere. Everything maintained, cared for. Perfect. The paint on every house was fresh, lawns cut close and even. In the middle of a little square sat a single flagpole, a flag hanging dead still in the windless air. No cars anywhere, no people anywhere. It felt less like driving into a town and more like driving into a photograph. Whatever irritation I'd been carrying about getting lost just evaporated, replaced by the specific, dizzy high you get when you find something nobody else has.
I'd found it, the perfect silence I'd been chasing for years, without ever naming it out loud. My own untouched, sacred place. I killed the engine and sat behind the wheel for a while, staring at all that stillness. It was so quiet I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Eventually I got out. My boots crunched on the dusty pavement. I braced for that stale, closed-up smell you get in abandoned places. Instead, the air was clean, fresh, just pine. I walked the main street, past houses with their blinds pulled down evenly, past porches with swing seats waiting on somebody. I pulled my phone out to take a picture and noticed I had 0 bars. I made my way toward the general store. The paint, red and white, looked like it had gone on the day before, a sign in the window reading, "Open." I tried the door out of habit more than hope, and it swung open easily. The lock had already been broken, quietly, sometime before I got there. The air inside was cool and completely still. The shelves were stocked, canned goods, bags of chips, cartons of milk, labels still bright under a thick layer of dust. No rot, no mice, not one insect. It was a perfect copy of a working store, just paused. I walked the aisles, watching dust swirl up in the light through the broken front window. Near the register sat a jar of something that might have once been pickled eggs, floating in brine gone thick and cloudy. Behind the counter, I found a calendar tacked to the wall. January 1985. The pages were a little yellowed, but otherwise perfect. The strange part, the last page torn off underneath was December 1984. And yes, before you ask, I checked the register. A handful of oxidized coins and a few brittle, crumbling elastic bands. That's it. I kept walking after the store, and the feeling of wonder kept building. Every street was spotless, a monument to some era when somebody really cared about this place. A block over, I came across a school building, small, brick, with a play area out front. Right in the middle of the yard sat a red rubber ball, like someone had dropped it mid-game and just never came back for it. I pushed on the unlocked door. Inside, the air was heavier, thick with the smell of old paper and wood. One classroom had a chalkboard with something written across it in careful cursive. Final exam. Rows of desks sat perfectly straight, and on one of them, an unfinished essay about the state of the nation, dated 1984. The best find of the day was the movie theater. No name on the marquee, but the posters were bright and vivid, advertising films I half recognized from my childhood. The ticket window was open, so I climbed in through it myself. Behind the counter stood an old popcorn machine, silent, one dried-out kernel on the dusty glass. I walked into the main hall, footsteps echoing in the dark, and stood in the aisle facing the blank screen. That's when I felt it.
A cold, sudden, and total ran straight through me, like somebody had cracked a window open in the dead of winter, except there was no window open anywhere. Underneath it, a hum, so faint I almost convinced myself it was just my own ears ringing. I told myself it was a transformer somewhere outside. The feeling didn't go away. A tight, prickling sensation settled on the back of my neck and stayed there. I snapped one quick photo of the dusty theater and got out into the daylight. I drove back the way I came. The second I hit the main road, my phone lit up all at once, a week's worth of notifications arriving in about 4 seconds. I checked the time. 9 at night. That's not possible. I'd driven maybe an hour before I found that turnoff, and I couldn't have spent more than 2 hours poking around the town, tops. By my own math, it should have been around 3 in the afternoon. I told myself the time must have gotten away from me. I didn't have a better explanation, so I drove home. Except there was one more thing. I passed that same '67 Camaro again, in the exact same driveway, at the exact same angle. And every single detour sign was gone, even the ones back by the store that had walked me into all of this in the first place. Gone, like none of it had ever been there. The first thing I did once I got in the door was call my best friend, Luke, my usual partner in crime for stuff like this. "Luke, man, you are not going to believe what just happened to me," I said, and I could hear my own voice shaking, somewhere between excited and not quite right. A whole town, perfectly preserved, like a time capsule from '84. Nobody there, no graffiti, nothing touched. You would have lost your mind over this place. Luke went quiet for a second, then said, "What are you even talking about? A place like that would already be all over every Urbex forum on the planet." I walked him through it, how I found it, the detour signs disappearing afterward, that road showing up out of nowhere. Then Luke cut in. "Hang on, what detour? I drove past your street today. There's no construction over there." I told him I'd send photos and pulled up my gallery to prove it. There was nothing there. The town, the store, the theater, gone. Just corrupted, broken files where the photos should have been. I kept scrolling, more and more rattled, but it was all static. "You okay, man?" Luke asked, real worry in his voice now. "You're acting really weird. You sure you didn't get into something you shouldn't have?" I told him I was fine and hung up. Then I sat there in the quiet for a long time, staring at an empty mug on the counter. I woke up the next morning and called in sick before I'd even finished my coffee. I had a mission, and no amount of guilt about missing a shift was going to slow me down. I pulled up Google Maps on my laptop and started rebuilding yesterday's route, turn by turn, the exact same way the detour had led me.
Every road checked out exactly the way I remembered it. Except for the turn into the trees. There was nothing there. No road at all. Frustrated, I dug into the history of the area instead. The land had once belonged to a lumber baron named Joseph Leary, who'd drowned in 1893 hauling timber downriver for a private hunting lodge he was building out west of town. The land passed down through his family until a developer bought it in the early 2000s. No mention anywhere of another settlement nearby. Nothing. Before I could dig any further, my phone lit up. Luke. "Hey, you doing all right?" His voice had that same careful, over-patient tone parents use on a kid they're disappointed in. "What are you even talking about?" I asked, genuinely thrown. "Yesterday, you were totally out of it, going on about some hidden town, like a time capsule from the 80s. I closed my eyes and breathed out slowly. "Look, I know what I saw. If you don't believe me, come see for yourself." I already knew that even if he didn't buy a word of it, the idea of a place like that was too good for him to pass up. Fine, I'm getting dressed," he grumbled. "Give me a minute." Once we'd both had breakfast, we climbed into my car and headed out toward the town. Luke kept his phone out the whole drive, scrolling through maps, checking forums. "Man, you're such a liar," he laughed. "There's no town out there." I gripped the wheel and told him I didn't care what he believed. I saw it. I felt it. I still remember the air in that place. It's real. And he was just jealous I'd found it, and he hadn't. He just snorted. "I think whatever you smoked had something laced in it. Now you're dragging me out here to go find your imaginary village." I slammed the brakes hard enough to throw him forward against the seatbelt, his head snapping down and back. His iced cap went straight down his shirt and across his lap. "You idiot!" he shouted, wiping the brown mess off his chest. His mood was officially ruined. We drove the rest of the way in something close to silence, just a low mutter of complaints from Luke and the radio filling the gaps. I kept my eyes on the shoulder and, finally, relief flooding through me, I spotted the same dirt track leading into the trees. "Stop," Luke said sharply, his voice gone flat. "This road isn't on any GPS." "Told you," I said, already turning onto it. "This road looks brand new," he added, genuinely surprised. And he wasn't wrong. The dirt was smooth, no tire tracks, no wear at all, like it had been freshly graded a few hours earlier. We drove a few minutes before the engines started sputtering, then died completely. The dashboard lights flickered and went dark. I turned the key, got one dry, useless click, and nothing else. Luke stared at me, wide-eyed. "What the hell?" "The car was fine 2 seconds ago." "I don't know," I said, and something heavy dropped into my stomach. The silence that settled over us was total, heavier than any silence I'd ever gone looking for. "We should walk. Town's not far." We got out and started down the road on foot. Trees rose up straight and even on either side, long shadows stretching over us so it felt like we were walking through a tunnel. We talked in whispers without really deciding to, and even that felt too loud. Then, without any warning, a wave of sound hit us out of nowhere, and we both flinched. It was the murmur of dozens of conversations layered on top of each other, a chorus of voices and tones with no clear source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, but the closer we walked, the sharper it got. Luke and I looked at each other,
both of us caught in the exact same kind of stunned. A few minutes later, the trees pulled back, and we saw it. The same town, except this time, it was alive. People walked the sidewalks, sat talking on porches, mowed lawns. Everything about it looked flawless. The paint on the houses, the way people were dressed. The only thing still missing was cars. Not one anywhere on those perfectly clean streets. Luke froze solid, eyes not quite believing what they were looking at. The murmur of voices pressing in from every direction, far too loud for a town that small. "What is this place?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer for him. Whatever doubt Luke had been carrying was gone, replaced by real fear. The people moved smoothly, frozen smiles on their faces, eyes seeming to look through us instead of at us. Their conversations sounded less like talking and more like a low, rhythmic hum vibrating in the air. "This isn't real," Luke whispered. "What is?" Before he could finish, a woman came toward us, pale, in a flowered dress, hair pinned into a perfect bun.
Her smile was the widest I'd ever seen, but her eyes moved independently of each other, like they were struggling to line up. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said, her voice much too sweet and much too loud. "You must be lost." She didn't wait for an answer, just extended one hand toward the square. "We don't get many visitors here in Haven. Let us show you around. Stay a while." As she spoke, the people around us began turning toward us, one by one. The murmur cut off completely, and dozens of pairs of eyes locked onto us at once, every face carrying that same wide, empty smile. Luke took a step back. "I think we should go," he murmured. "Nonsense," the woman said, her smile never wavering. "Don't be shy. There's so much to see in Haven." She gestured for us to follow, deeper into the town, her hand moving like it was made of porcelain. "Let me show you our little paradise." Against every ounce of sense I had, and against Luke's outright panic, and my own dread creeping up right alongside my curiosity, we followed her. The woman, who told us her name was Margaret, walked ahead of us with smooth, exact movements. The rest of Haven's residents fell in step behind us, forming a slow-moving little crowd, all of them smiling, all of them with that same unfocused look in their eyes. Margaret showed us flawless gardens, freshly painted houses, empty streets. "Our town is a refuge," she said, almost singing it. "Here, everything is exactly the way it should be." We passed the same store I'd wandered through the day before. The open sign hung in the same spot, but now there were people inside, smiles identical to the ones on the street, quietly stocking shelves, ringing up purchases, and the second we walked past, they went still and turned to stare. Further along, we reached the school. Kids in the yard were playing a game with that same red ball, the playground packed with children swinging, sliding, all their movements perfectly in sync. They waved at us, every single hand lifting the exact same way at the exact same moment. "Our children are always so well behaved," Margaret said proudly. "They understand the value of harmony." The hum of conversation kept going the entire time, constant, meaningless, scattered greetings and empty chatter repeating. Luke never stopped whispering at me to run, but the crowd around us had closed in tight enough that there was nowhere left to go. They formed a silent, smiling wall around us. "You see," Margaret said, stopping at the town square by the flagpole. "Isn't it wonderful? Don't you feel the peace?" I had to admit, There was a strange kind of beauty in all that stillness. But underneath the surface, something in me had started pulling tight with real dread. Everything was too perfect, too controlled. "Where are the cars?"
Luke suddenly blurted, his voice cracking. "Why doesn't anyone drive anywhere?" Margaret only smiled wider. Her eyes drifted past him entirely. "We have no need of such things in Haven. We have everything we need already." She turned her head, slow and precise, until her eyes finally lined up and locked directly on mine. "Isn't that right, Julian?" Luke's hand clamped onto my arm, his fingers digging in like a vice. "Julian, we need to go, right now." We started backing away, not once taking our eyes off Margaret. The crowd, which had been standing completely still, started moving. Not running, not walking fast either. Something slower and smoother, and far more coordinated. "There's no need to be afraid," Margaret said, her voice dropping into something low and soothing. "We only want you to feel at home." She spread her arms toward the town behind her. "You've been so lost for so long. Don't you want to finally find your way home?" Something in her words hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't talking about a wrong turn or a detour that led me here. She knew. She knew exactly what I'd been chasing all these years, this hunger for silence, for a place nobody else could find. This town hadn't just appeared. It had been waiting, calling. "We have everything you need," she said, tilting her head to one side. Behind her, the crowd tilted in exactly the same instant, like a single machine, and every voice rose together perfectly in time. "No more searching, no more wandering, only perfect silence." I didn't wait to hear anything else. Luke and I bolted. The streets that had looked so beautiful a minute earlier now felt like the walls of a trap closing in. Behind us, the silence broke into a wave of footsteps, dozens of them, not running exactly, more like something rolling forward all at once. Luke screamed high and raw, pure terror. "They're too fast!" I looked back. They moved in a way that shouldn't have been possible, feet barely touching the ground, faces locked into those same frozen smiles. Margaret out in front, her arms swinging with an unnatural, exaggerated rhythm. We cut around a corner and it hit me. There was no outrunning this on an open street. I spotted a narrow gap between two buildings and dragged Luke into it with me. We pressed ourselves flat against the wall, chests heaving. That low hum I'd heard back in the theater came roaring back, louder now, coming from the ground itself, from underneath everything. The walls at our backs felt cold and strangely soft. A second later, the crowd surged past the mouth of the alley. Their silence as they passed was so much worse than our own ragged breathing. For 1 second, I actually thought we'd made it. Then I looked toward the far end of the alley. Where there had been a gap between the buildings a minute ago, there was now a solid brick wall. The air went colder. The hum grew until I could feel it in my bones. Out on the street, dozens of heads all turned toward us at exactly the same moment. They knew exactly where we were. We were caught. The wall behind us was very real, and the footsteps closing in were getting louder by the second. Luke let out a broken sob. "We're trapped," he choked out. The hum kept building until it felt less like sound and more like a deep, heavy bass pressing against my chest. The walls themselves seemed to be pulsing, shadows around us bending into shapes that had no business existing. This wasn't just a town.
This was alive, thinking, and it was closing its fist around the two of us. Then the first of them stepped into the alley. Margaret in front, that same terrible smile fixed in place. A dozen more followed behind her, moving in perfect unison, heads tilting the same fraction of a degree at the same fraction of a second. They didn't run. They walked, calm, in step with each other. Luke and I braced to fight. Two men grabbed him, hands cold and unbelievably strong. Two women took hold of my arms, their fingers slick and clammy, like raw meat left too long on a counter. Every single one of them was smiling. "We told you there was no need to be afraid," Margaret said, her voice as sickly sweet as ever. "There's no need for that here. You've come home now, and we'll get you settled in." They dragged us out of the alley and back toward the square, sunlight throwing long, warped shadows across the ground. The people of Haven closed in around us, silent, smiling, and marched us toward the town hall. Up close, it didn't look like a building anymore. It looked like the mouth of a cage. Inside, they led us down a long, spotless hallway into a room like a lounge, lit in soft, even light, the air smelling of old paper and something faintly, sickly sweet. The crowd stopped, still gripping us tight. Margaret stepped forward. Her smile stayed just as fixed as everyone else's.
Luke wrenched himself half free and shouted, "Let go of me! What is this place? You're all out of your minds!" Margaret's smile tightened, just slightly.
"We're a family. Haven is family. We're always together."
"Who are you?" I asked, ignoring Luke's shouting. "What do you want?"
"I'm the town's guide," she said,
her eyes drifting between mine, never quite settling.
"And so are they. We were lost too, once, same as you. But the town found us. It needs more life, more silence."
"This isn't silence," Luke shouted. "It's death. There's not one car out there. This is a museum, not a town." The woman shook her head slowly.
"The outside world is the real museum. A museum of noise and chaos. Here, we're perfect. The town takes care of us, and we become part of it. One mind."
"And what happens to the ones who become part of it?" I forced out. Her smile stretched wider.
"You'll be happy. The town takes your memories, your worries, your fears. It quiets you.
You become part of us, and we become part of you. You'll finally find the silence you've spent your whole life chasing."
"Forever."
Luke wrenched free again, snarling.
"I'm not becoming one of your dolls."
Margaret's head tilted, slow and deliberate.
"This isn't up to you. Haven is hungry, and you're here. It takes what it needs, and you'll give it willingly."
Around us, the rest of Haven's residents began to sway, all in one slow, hypnotic rhythm. The hum grew louder until it wasn't sound anymore. It was pressure, filling the room from every side.
"You spent your whole life searching for this, didn't you, Julian?" she said, turning to me. "Silence. It's the only thing you've ever really wanted. You really thought that detour was an accident? Oh, sweetheart, the signs you saw were never real. We felt your hunger for silence, and we showed you the way."
Cold, total, and absolute dropped straight through me. This town hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. It had built a path in my own head,
planted the idea, and I'd walked myself right to its door. It lured me, on purpose. "Why me?" I breathed out. "The silence you crave is an escape," Margaret said. "From the noise that made you who you are. From the shouting that filled your childhood. From doors slamming and a temper you used to hide from in a closet, just to steal one single moment of quiet. That's why you go looking for abandoned places, Julian. It was never about the history. It was always about finding somewhere he would never think to find you." Luke lunged at her, screaming, "Get your hands off him, you sick!" Before he could finish, the crowd surged forward as one single mechanism. Their hands, moving like synchronized pistons, seized him and dragged him back. His screaming was swallowed by the hum, which kept growing. I tried to pull free, but the hands holding me were unnaturally strong. Their cold fingers dug into my arms, and we kept moving deeper into the building. The walls pulsed. The floor turned soft underneath us, like we were descending into the inside of something living, the air thick with pine, and under it, something metallic and sweet. We came out into a vast space that wasn't a building at all. It was a cavern. The ceiling was made of the same organic, pulsing tissue, dim light bleeding through it from somewhere. We were standing inside Haven itself. Its walls breathed around us to a rhythm that made my bones ache with each pulse. Dark veins ran through cracks in the surface, throbbing like vessels carrying blood, a thick fluid weeping out of them into dark pools on the floor. My legs gave out, and I dropped to the ground. It was soft and sticky, and it felt like it was reaching for me. A tingling spread across my skin. Then a burning heat rolled through my whole body, and my body began to change. I felt the bones in my fingers dissolving, my muscles losing their shape, my skin stretching and twisting underneath me. I watched, horrified, as they let go of Luke. He hit the ground, gasping, then looked down at his own hands. His skin was bubbling, like water starting to boil, the bones underneath dissolving, fingers fusing together and drawing inward. His body twisted into something unrecognizable, inhuman. He opened his mouth to scream, and all that came out was a low hum the walls around us swallowed instantly. His eyes, blown wide with terror, were the last human thing left of him. And then the pool that used to be Luke was already sinking into the floor. Nothing was left of him at all. I felt something being pulled out of me. Not thoughts, memories. I saw my father's face, his mouth open in a silent scream. It wasn't fading so much as being torn loose from me, pulled out of my skull, consumed by whatever was pressing in around me. And then a strange calm rolled over me, wave after wave. The panic dissolved. The pain dissolved. Everything disappeared. My fears, everything that made me who I was, my whole existence, all of it washed away. In its place came absolute, total silence. I'd finally found my perfect stillness.